The first thing I packed was the coffee maker. Not my clothes, not my laptop, not the box of documents I'd been meaning to organize for 2 years. The coffee maker. A 12-cup Cuisinart my grandmother left me along with the house, and I wasn't leaving it behind for them to use. That probably tells you everything you need to know about where my head was at. I was 26 when my grandmother passed. We called her Nana Jo, and she was the kind of woman who kept her cardigan pocket and remembered every single birthday without writing anything down. She left me her house in Dayton, a 3-bedroom ranch with a cracked driveway and a peach tree in the backyard that produced exactly 4 peaches a year. Appraisal came back at $218. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have rent. At 26, I owned a house outright, and I thought that was the beginning of something good. My brother and his wife had been renting an apartment across town. They'd been there 4 years, always 1 month behind, always borrowing from whoever would pick up the phone. When Nana Jo passed and the house became mine, my mom called me before I'd even driven home from the funeral. "You have all that space," she said. "Scott and Amber need a fresh start. You know how things have been for them." I did know. I've been hearing about how things had been for them for 4 years. I told her I'd think about it. She called back the next morning, and the morning after that. Scott is 3 years older than me. Growing up, he was the fun one, the one who could make our dad laugh when nobody else could, the one who taught me to ride a bike by running alongside me for 45 minutes without complaining once. I loved my brother. That's the part people skip over when they hear stories like this. It wasn't that I didn't love him. It's that loving someone and being clear-eyed about who they are can be two completely different things, and I hadn't learned yet how to hold both at the same time. They moved in on a Saturday in March. Scott, Amber, and their daughter Zoe, who was 4 and obsessed with anything purple. I gave them the 2 back bedrooms and kept the front bedroom for myself. We agreed on some ground rules: shared kitchen, shared laundry, split utilities down the middle, no formal rent because they were family and it was my grandmother's house and I was trying to do the right thing. That arrangement lasted 11 days before my mom suggested I charge them something symbolic to help them feel less like a burden. $300 a month, she said. Just so they have some skin in the game. You know how Scott gets when he feels like a charity case. I didn't want Scott to feel like a charity case, so I agreed. What I didn't think through, and what I should have thought through, was that charging them $300 a month for a house I owned free and clear meant I was collecting rent from my brother while still paying all the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, and the maintenance on the 30-year-old house with a water heater that had opinions. $300 did not cover any of that. $300 covered roughly the cost of my own feelings about the situation. My job at the time was remote. UX research for a mid-size ass company in Austin. I'd been doing it for 2 years, made decent money, and worked from the front bedroom with the door closed from 9 to 5. Scott drove for a delivery app. Amber worked part-time at a dental office front desk. They were not, by any measure, struggling the way they had been in that apartment. But the spending didn't slow down. New TV in their room within the first 2 months. Not a small one. I walked past their door one evening and saw the box propped against the wall, 65-inch, still had the Best Buy sticker on it. Amber got her nails done every 2 weeks. I'm not saying she shouldn't do that. I'm saying I noticed it because I had started cutting back on things I didn't need, quietly, without really examining why. Zoe's purple phase gave way to a pink phase and then an everything phase, and toys accumulated in the living room in layers. I started spending more time in my room. I told myself it was because I worked from home and needed the separation. My boyfriend at the time, I'd call him Theo, came over for dinner one night in June and made the mistake of being charming. Scott liked him immediately, which meant Scott started talking to him the way Scott talks to people he likes, directly, without a filter, with a kind of honesty that only works if you know him well enough to understand that he means it affectionately. "She makes good money," Scott told Theo over pasta. You'd never know it looking at her room. She's got like one lamp. Everyone laughed. I laughed. I made a joke about being a minimalist. Theo asked me about it later in the car. Does he know what you make? Roughly, I said. And he doesn't think it's weird that he's living in your house for 300 a month? I didn't have a good answer. I changed the subject. By fall, the 300 had become irregular. September came and went. I mentioned it gently. Scott handed me 250 and said he'd get me the rest after his next payout. October came. He didn't bring it up. I didn't push. My mom called me in November to say that Scott and Amber were stressed about the holidays, that Zoe deserved a good Christmas, that money was tight. I know money's tight, I said. He's 2 months behind on what we agreed. Silence. Then, she's your niece. I want to be precise about what that sentence did to me because it did something. Zoe was 4 years old and she didn't have anything to do with the rent arrangement, and hearing her name used that way made me feel simultaneously guilty and furious. Guilty because of course I loved Zoe and of course I wanted her to have a good Christmas. Furious because I understood exactly what was happening and still couldn't figure out how to say so. I didn't say anything. I bought Zoe a purple bike with a basket on the front for Christmas. $45 used from Facebook Marketplace, but I wrapped it nicely. Theo and I broke up in January. It wasn't entirely about the house situation, but it wasn't entirely unrelated either. He had said, in the careful way he always said difficult things, that he worried about me. That I had a habit of making myself smaller around my family. That he'd watched me apologize for things I hadn't done. That the house thing specifically bothered him because he couldn't understand why I stayed in my own home under those conditions without saying something. You own the house, he said. You're acting like a tenant. I told him he didn't understand family dynamics. He said he understood them fine and that understanding them didn't mean accepting them. We tried for another month after that conversation. We didn't make it. By spring of the following year, I had been living in my grandmother's house for 14 months. Scott and Amber were 7 months behind on the 300. I had stopped tracking after a while, which I think was its own kind of decision. My property taxes had come due in February, $3,400. My homeowner's insurance renewed at $1,800. The water heater finally gave out in March and I paid $12,200 to replace it. None of this was shared, none of this was discussed. It was my house, so it was my problem. Amber got a promotion at the dental office and went full-time. I heard about it on the Thursday evening when she came home and told Scott in the kitchen, and I stood in the hallway outside my room listening to him cheer for her, and I felt genuinely happy for them. And then immediately after that I felt something else entirely. I had started tracking things around then, not out of any strategy, just because I couldn't sleep and I had a spreadsheet open and I needed somewhere to put my thoughts. I tracked what I'd paid since March of the previous year. Property taxes, insurance, water heater, the plumber I called when the bathroom sink backed up, the electrician I called when 2 of the outlets in the kitchen stopped working. I tracked what I'd collected in rent. 11 months of payments, averaging out to about $210 a month once I accounted for the months Scott had paid nothing or partial. The number at the bottom of the column was not a small number. I didn't show anyone the spreadsheet. I closed the laptop and went to bed. My mom visited in April. She walked through the house in a way that reminded me of someone taking stock of something that belongs to them. She rearranged the kitchen cabinets while I was on a work call, and when I came out and asked what she was doing, she said she was just trying to make things more efficient. Nana Jo always kept the mugs on the left, I said. Well, it makes more sense on the right, she said. I put the mugs back on the left after she left. She called 2 days later. She said she'd been thinking and she felt like I needed to contribute more to the household. That living with family wasn't free and I should be helping out more. Cooking, cleaning, running errands. Mom, I said, I own the house. That's not the attitude, she said. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I said I had a meeting and got off the phone. That summer, my company gave me a meaningful raise. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I had started keeping things to myself by then, not out of strategy, but out of a kind of exhausted self preservation. Every piece of good news I shared became a reason why I could do more, give more, be more flexible about whatever they needed. I had learned, slowly and without meaning to, that in my family, success was a resource they felt entitled to draw from. My friend from college, she lives in Seattle now, visited for a weekend in August. I hadn't seen her in almost 2 years. We were sitting on the back porch on Saturday evening and she was watching the four peaches on the tree, and she asked me to just walk her through what my life looked like on a daily basis. I walked her through it. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Do you hear what you just described?" "I know how it sounds," I said. "I don't think you do," she said. "You're paying to live in your own house. You're apologizing for being in your own kitchen. You lost your relationship. You're working full time from a single room and describing it as a lifestyle choice." I told her she didn't understand the history, the family dynamics, how complicated it was. She said she understood that it was complicated. She also said that complicated didn't mean I had to keep absorbing the cost of everyone else's comfort. She flew back to Seattle on Sunday. I thought about her words for 3 weeks. In October, I talked to a real estate attorney. I just wanted to understand my options, what it would look like to formally ask Scott and Amber to leave, what the process was, what my obligations were. The attorney was a woman in her 50s who had clearly had this conversation many times before. She explained the process clearly and without judgment. I learned that even family members without a lease still have tenant protections, and that I would need to provide proper written notice and follow the state process. I didn't do anything with that information immediately. I filed it away. Scott and Amber had a big fight in November. I heard it through the wall. Not specifics, just the shape of it, the rise and fall. The next morning, Amber was quiet at breakfast. Scott left early. Zoe watched cartoons and ate cereal, and I sat across from her and she showed me a drawing she'd made of a purple horse, and I helped her tape it to the refrigerator. And I thought, none of this is her fault. None of it was Zoe's fault. I want to be clear about that, because I thought about Zoe a lot in all of this. She was 5 now, and perceptive, and she noticed things. She noticed when her parents were tense. She noticed when I was quiet. She had started calling me by my first name instead of aunt, which I kind of loved. My brother found out about my raise in December. I don't know how. I suspect Amber found a pay stub or a direct deposit notification, something. He didn't confront me directly. Instead, he mentioned it at dinner one night casually, in front of Amber, in front of Zoe, in a tone that was friendly on the surface and something else underneath. "Heard your company's been doing well," he said. "Treating you right." "Doing okay," I said. "Because we've been thinking about Zoe's school situation. There's this private kindergarten, actually not that far. Really strong program. We just can't swing it on our own right now." Amber was looking at her plate. I said I didn't have that kind of money available. Scott laughed. Not a mean laugh. Just a laugh that said he didn't believe me. That night I opened the spreadsheet. I hadn't looked at it since spring. I added up everything since March of the previous year. 22 months. Property taxes, both cycles, both insurance renewals, water heater, the plumber, the electrician. The gutters I'd had cleaned in September. Partial rent collected, averaged out. The number at the bottom was $23,400 more than I'd taken in. I sat with that for a while. 3 things happened in January. First, I applied for a senior role at a company in Chicago. Remote first, significantly better compensation. I didn't tell anyone. Second, Scott posted on Facebook. It was about me, though he didn't use my name. He described a family member who had more than enough and still chose to let family struggle. And his friends, who knew us, who had known us for years, responded with comments that were sympathetic to him and unkind about me. My mom liked 3 of the comments. My aunt left a heart on the post. I found out because a mutual friend texted me a screenshot. Third, I got the Chicago job. I read the offer letter 4 times. I accepted on a Thursday. I told no one. I gave myself 3 weeks to make a plan. I talked to the attorney again. I gave Scott and Amber formal written notice as required under Ohio law, 60 days, notarized, delivered in person with a witness present, documented. I booked movers. I found an apartment in Chicago with a view of absolutely nothing except the building across the street, and it was the most exciting thing I'd ever signed. The night before the movers came, Scott knocked on my door. He stood in the hallway and asked if we could talk, and I said yes, and we sat at the kitchen table where we'd eaten 100 dinners together. He asked if I was really doing this. I said I was. He said he didn't understand what had changed, that I'd seemed fine, that if something was wrong, I should have said something. I thought about that word, fine. I thought about all the things I'd been doing while appearing fine. Paying a loan, sleeping poorly, eating lunch in my car sometimes just to sit in a space that felt neutral, losing a relationship, partly because I couldn't explain my own life to someone who was trying to love me. I said, I haven't been fine for a while. I just got good at not showing it. He looked at the table. Then he said that the Facebook post, he hadn't meant it the way it landed, that he was frustrated and venting and hadn't thought it through. I nodded. He asked if I was going to sell the house. I said I hadn't decided. I had decided. I left on a Saturday morning in February. I took my grandmother's coffee maker, the peach-colored quilt from her linen closet, and a framed photo of her standing in the backyard next to the tree the year it actually produced a dozen peaches. The movers took the rest. My mom called while I was somewhere on I-70 in Indiana. I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times. I didn't listen to the voicemails until I was parked outside my new building in Chicago with my emergency car snacks and a coffee from a drive-thru that had already gone cold. I listened to all 3. The first was confusion. Where was I? What was happening? No one had told her. The second was anger. How could I do this to Scott and Amber, to Zoe, to the family? How could I just leave without a real conversation? The third was different, quieter. She said she knew things had been hard, that she hadn't always handled things right, that she was sorry I felt like I had to leave. That third one was the one I listened to twice. I put my phone in the cup holder and sat for a while. I listed the house with an agent in March. It sold in 11 days for $224,000. After taxes and fees, I had enough to pay off my car, fund 6 months of an emergency account, and put a real down payment towards something of my own eventually. Scott and Amber found a rental by the time closing happened. I know because my mom told me, and because I checked, and because I needed to know Zoe had a place to sleep before I signed the paperwork. I still think about Zoe. I sent her a purple backpack for her birthday in April, anonymously, through my mom's address. I don't know if she knew it was from me. I've been in Chicago for 8 months now. My apartment is small and it echoes a little when it's quiet. And I have exactly the furniture I chose, exactly the kitchen setup I wanted, and the mugs are on the left because I put them there. My brother and I don't talk regularly. We text sometimes. Nothing significant. He sent me a gift on my birthday that made me laugh, and I sent one back, and that was something. My mom and I talk every couple weeks. It's still complicated. She's still complicated. She still says things occasionally that land wrong. But she's also trying in the way that people try when they've been confronted with something they'd rather not see about themselves. I'm trying too. I'm trying to understand that she genuinely loves me, and that love and clarity are not the same thing, and that I can have one without requiring the other. Theo and I are not together. We tried one more conversation about 6 months ago, just coffee. Just to see. I think we are people who care about each other who couldn't make the timing work, and I've made a kind of peace with that. What I did not expect in all of this was how quiet it would be on the other side. Not peaceful, exactly. Quiet. Like a hum that had been in the background for so long you forgot it was there, and then one day it stops, and you realize how much energy you'd been spending just to hear around it. I wake up now and make coffee in my grandmother's coffee maker. I drink it standing at the kitchen window. I go to work. I come home. Some evenings I sit on my fire escape and watch the street below and think about the peach tree, and whether whoever bought the house will bother with it, and whether they'll get 4 peaches this year or 12. I hope they get 12. I hope they pick them when they're ripe and don't wait too long, because peaches don't keep, and neither does everything else that matters. I am not the person who moved out of that house. I am not the person who moved in either. I am something in between, still figuring out the distance. But for the first time in longer than I want to admit, I'm figuring it out on my own terms, in my own space, with my mugs exactly where I left them. And that is enough. For now, that is more than enough. I've thought a lot about the sequence of things, not to assign blame. I'm past that mostly, but because the sequence actually matters. Scott didn't wake up one day and decide to take advantage of me. Amber didn't move in with a plan. My mom didn't call me the day of the funeral because she was calculating something. It happened incrementally, the way most things that hurt you do, one small ask at a time, one boundary softened, one moment where I said yes because it was easier than explaining why the answer should have been no, and I let it. That's the part I've had to sit with. I used to think accountability meant finding the moment where someone else went wrong. But the harder version, the one that actually changed something in me, was finding the moments where I went along. The morning I moved the $300 arrangement from symbolic contribution to basically nothing without saying a word. The dinner where Scott hinted at private school tuition and I just sat there. The phone calls where my mom redefined what I owed my own family. And I nodded along because I didn't want to be the person who made things difficult. Intelligence, I think, is not just about knowing the right answer. It's about being honest with yourself about what you already know. I knew somewhere around month 4 that the situation was not what I'd told myself it was. I had data, I had a spreadsheet I closed because I didn't want to look at the number at the bottom. Knowing something and being willing to act on it are two completely different things, and for a long time I only had the first one. What finally moved me was not anger. It wasn't even the Facebook post, though that clarified something. It was my friend, sitting on the porch in August, asking me to just describe my own life out loud and hearing it, really hearing it. There's a kind of courage that doesn't look like courage from the outside. It doesn't announce itself. It just looks like booking a consultation with an attorney, or opening a job listing, or packing a coffee maker before you pack anything else because you finally understand what belongs to you. Zoe didn't do anything wrong. Scott loved me in the way he knew how. My mom loves me, still. I'm losing that. But I also believe that love without honesty isn't actually care, it's comfort. Theirs at my expense. And at some point, staying in an arrangement that costs you everything quietly is not generosity. It's just a different kind of disappearing. I'm not the person I was when I moved into that house. I'm not fully the person I'm becoming either. But I know something now that I didn't know then. The life that fits you is the one you build on purpose, not the one that accumulates around you while you're busy trying to be easy to be around. Peaches don't keep. Neither does the time you have to figure out who you actually are. Pick them when they're ripe. That's not a metaphor I planned. It's just what I think about on the mornings I stand at the window with my grandmother's coffee and look at whatever the sky is doing. And most mornings, that's enough to start the day right.